There was a snafu with one of my sessions the other day. I can't remember if it was the morning one or the afternoon. I think it was the afternoon where I failed to record somehow. But fortunately, I have 2 sessions and they cover the same stuff. So even if something goes wrong, I can cover it. But I got to record the sessions and post them on YouTube for this other session, the 12 o'clock Monday, Wednesday, Friday one that I'm assisting with as well. Our department head is covering that one for a dude who bailed very early on, just before the semester started. Anyway, so there are recordings on YouTube now, in case anybody didn't see that announcement. All right, so number 1, in addition to Blackboard Collaborate, recordings will be available on YouTube. And there was an announcement about where the links are. It's pretty easy to find regardless. Okay, number 2, Packback is imminent. Dun, dun, dun. So what does Packback mean? Well, remember, Packback is this online Q&A platform. I'm going to take a minute to go over that. So all the stuff, all the instructions, they're in here in course content in Packback, which is now available. So the instructions, I'm going to go through the policies. They should all be pretty clear, but you never know. I mean, people always have questions. That's fine. There we go. Okay, so first of all, Packback counts for 100 of the 1,000 points of the course. If you go in and you look at the point distribution in section 2 of the syllabus, it'll say Packback 100 points. But you can actually get 130 points if you do more. It's just, you know, the expectation is 100. If you want extra, go for it, get it. Okay, so over the entire semester, you can get up to 130 points, and each week you can earn up to 15 points towards that total, which gives you a lot of flexibility. If you don't want to start right now because you got some other shit going on that's more important, or if you want to knock it all out of the way and be done with it like week 10, whatever, it's your call, okay? And you don't have to do it every week. Take a couple weeks off, come back to it, whatever. All right, so it's not super rigid. The point is just to generate some discussion about these topics, give people a reason to look things up, discuss things, you know, learn some stuff. That's the idea. So how does it work? Well, each week, you can post up to 2 questions. Questions are 5 points each, and up to 4 answers for 2.5 points each. And the 15-point weekly cap applies, you know, even if you like overload that and do like 2 questions, 4 answers, still the weekly cap is 15 points, right? So repeat, 15 points per week, even if you post more questions and answers, and over the entire semester, you can earn at most 130 points. All that's good so far? Questions? All right, part 2, the evaluation process, right? So you can't just, you know, write why, or why does Facebook suck so bad, right? That's not gonna do it. So Packback has a question and answer evaluation system that's reasonably, it looks at things like the length of your answer, the choice of words you use. If you include links to outside sources, there'll be a block to do that. Stuff like that is what's going to make your answer or your question answer a little bit better. Has to score at least 50 to qualify for credit. Good news is, if your initial posting scores below 50, you can, you know, rinse and repeat. You can keep on revising until it does get at least 50. Okay, so repeat that. Scores below 50, get 0 credit. Scores at least 50, get full credit. Okay? Okay. Now, when can you start? You start posting questions and answers starting first thing Saturday morning, right? You want to get in there at 12:01 a.m. and start playing with Packback, go for it, right? That's the first week that's going to do it. You can continue posting through the Friday before finals week, right? Friday before finals week, Packback is done. All credit opportunities are ended after that. So the end of each weekly period, Friday, 11:59 Chicago time, all right, 11:59 p.m. So if you get it in on Friday, it counts. But please don't wait till the last possible minute to post questions and answers. Packback occasionally suffers from late time delays. You know why? Because a bunch of people wait until the last minute to post their questions and answers. The system is a little overload, you know, Friday, 11:59 p.m. for that reason. So be careful. Anyway, also, remember, I have 450 students. So I got this section of 150. I got another section of 150. I'm helping out doing the Packback grading for another section of 150. If you write me a note saying, hey, I was a little late getting my stuff in, can I count it for another week? No, the system is not set up to do that automatically. The system is set up to take what's there and work with it. And I'm sure as hell not going to dig through 450, students worth of stuff to find yours and verify that it was a little bit late and personally adjust it for you when you could have just done it on time, right? If it were a class of 30 people, yeah, I'd be more forgiving, but 450, all right. Anyway, so weekly deadlines, Friday, 11:59 p.m. Chicago time, are strict. Ta-da. And especially because you have flexibility. Even if you miss a deadline 1 week, right, there's 13 weeks where you can put stuff together and get it all done, right? You only need to participate a little more than half the weeks. So, yeah. Anyway, and what should the question topics be? Well, question topics should always be related to the business being covered in lectures that week. So weeks 3 and 4, right, we'll be talking about Facebook. So your questions and answers should be about Facebook. But they don't have to be specific to information technology. Anything you want to talk about regarding the business is fine, right? I mean, IT stuff is great, but if you're finance, you're accounting, you're something else, and you want to talk about those kind of issues with Facebook, great, go for it, right? Have it be more interesting too. All right, questions on any of that? Okay. So next thing, very briefly, this is where you get to Packback. So first thing Friday morning, you'll get, I don't know about first thing, but sometime before noon Friday morning, they said, you should get an invite from Packback saying, hey, here's an email link where you can join the system. And once you've joined, right, I imagine that if you join through here, you'll get routed to a link where it asks you to sign up and join. Like I said, the downside of Packback costs $29, but if you think about it, $29 for all the course materials for a course these days, my opinion, that's pretty cheap. Right? I don't think you're going to find a lot of them that are close to zero like that. So yeah, apologies that it costs something, but the good news is this is something where everybody can get 100 points. There's no reason why you shouldn't get 100 points. There's no reason really why you shouldn't get 130 points out of 100. Okay, so for anybody who wants it, it's a nice full credit or extra credit opportunity. Anyway, so when you get there, when you sign up, you'll have a place where you can ask a question. Look, we already got a guy who asked a question. How about that? So he should review that. I don't know. Are you here this morning? Nan?
Yes, I'm here. I'm in the virtual.
Okay, great. So listen, the official time for starting submissions starts on Saturday. So I would say, since this one is rated at 47 right now, wait till Saturday, revise and resubmit it, get credit for it then, That should work, I hope. Okay, but it's a little early. I might count it anyway. I'm feeling generous. Maybe I'll throw it in if you want to do it. But, I shouldn't penalize somebody for jumping in on this thing. So, cool. But anyway, yeah, that's what you do. If you want to create a question, boom, there's a big red button, ask a new question, easy to find, and you can put in some stuff. All right, so here's what he has. How can Facebook manage to process a load of photos posted by users, and is SQL helping in organizing and solving the photo management? That's an interesting question. All right, well, you have to get a little bit more on that to bump it up over 50. Yeah, okay. I don't know. People will work on that. Okay, so anyway, that's Packback. And, begin Saturday morning. That's fine. But yeah, if you throw something in this week, I guess I'll count it. I'm feeling generous. So whatever. Okay. All right. Anything else? Oh yeah, labs start next week. Dun, dun, dun. Labs start next week. And probably you guys on Blackboard, can you see the lab sections yet? Well, let's see. I'm going to check in here. Let's see who's in. Is it fully populated? Yeah, it's fully populated. So you should have these. The lab sections, we will eventually fill those up with content. All right, so labs start next week. Number one, there are Blackboard section shells available now. So your one should be there. Number B, letter B, I will fill them with the appropriate content, like lab exercises, and add the TAs. Okay, so there's that. And letter C, remember, Monday is a holiday, so no labs, and the exercise will be due Tuesday, 11:59 p.m. So you don't have to go anywhere because it's Monday, right? But you still got to do the work. You still got to, you know, go through the lab. But the good news is it's a walkthrough. You know, I'll pop one of these out here from an earlier semester so you can get an idea of what's what. But they're all designed. Yeah, screen. No, you can see it. Oh, that's great. It's a Christmas miracle. Okay. I'll go back to some. All right. So for example, we start off with MS Access for the first one. It's basically a walkthrough. Okay. It tells you what to do, how to do. Why did it go to student preview, you bastard? Okay. Didn't want to do that. Here we go. So this, you know, it tells you what to do. Open Microsoft Access. You'll see a screen full of icons, your file, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So there's screenshots you should be able to manage to get your way through it. All right. Okay. Question. Oh, you know, and please get the lab exercises due on time. For everybody else, remember, other than holidays, in-person lab session attendance is required to get anything like full credit, okay? If you don't attend, max credit is 2 out of 6 points, because it's important that you be there, and I explained why the first lecture session. Okay, so please do show up. Okay, questions on anything else before I get into the lecture? All right. Today's beverage is coffee. All right, so we're going to resume with newsfeed. All right, I zipped ahead a little far. Okay, so remember, back to this, Facebook's initial model, when they were building up, how they're going to organize the feed, they said, well, how are we going to show the stuff that people really want to see first? And the 3 things they look at: affinity, weight, time decay. Affinity is basically how interested you are in the source of the content, you know, because we tend to follow individual people regardless of what they post. Number 2, how do we measure the significance of each interaction? If it's a kind of interaction that takes more effort, like posting a comment, Facebook's going to consider that more significant than just clicking like, okay? And again, different kinds of content, Facebook automatically prioritizes as having more weight. They know that people like to see images, like to see photos, so Facebook tends to prioritize those, all else equal. Last one is time decay. Facebook wants to preferentially show you newer stuff over older stuff, all else equal. If it's something that's just been posted, you're probably going to see that in the feed. Obviously, if it's something that's a few days old, you're probably not going to see it. But there is some weirdness that happens. If you guys have noticed this probably, if you use, sometimes you'll make a post and you have like a core of friends. Facebook does track like a list of recent interactions, like your 50 recent best buddies sort of, and it'll preferentially show content from them, or it'll preferentially show them your content if you post it. So right away, if you post something, you might get a big cluster of likes and it seems like it's always from the same people. And then the next day, you know, Facebook will expand that post to a few more people. Some of those people will see it, they'll like on it. Like 3, 4, 5 days later, some of your more peripheral friends, Facebook might get around to showing it to some of them and they'll see it. And you'll, you know, if you're on there posting a lot, you'll see kind of a recurring pattern of like, oh yeah, this is a guy who's never going to comment on my thing the 3rd day, but he might comment on it the 4th or 5th day. And that's just about how Facebook, you know, gradually shows your posts to more and more peripheral people. But anyway, those are the factors of EdgeRank. And of course, you know, that was something that was designed to work with minimal data. If you didn't know too much about what people were doing, or you didn't know too many specifics about them, Edge was a simple, you know, simple method to implement. It was pretty fast and it worked well without having a whole lot of data. But of course, Facebook continually gathers lots and lots and lots of data about user actions, user interactions. And if you want, you can, you know, read some more detail about it there. Obviously, the more data they have about you, they can make better predictions about your user behavior. So most things in the world, only a few variables are strong predictors. So an obvious one on Facebook would be, suppose I have a friend from school, right? And they post one of two things. They post either pictures of their kids on vacation, or they post long political rants that I'm not really interested in. Obviously, you know, as a human, we could look at that and say, oh yeah, family vacation photos, great. You want to see that, you're going to like that, Facebook should show you that. Politics, not so much, kind of done with that this year, you know? So if Facebook can filter out stuff like that, looking at things like the type, identify the type of post versus the content of the post, you know, it can do a better match, right? Right off the bat, for example, and there might be different kinds of photos. For example, suppose it's the kind of friend they either post family vacation photos that you like, or they post pictures of them, I don't know, at sporting events or, you know, eating at restaurants, stuff like that you kind of don't care about. And again, if Facebook can identify the kind of photo, then that's something else that they can say, oh yeah, this is the kind of photo you want to see. So in most cases, only a few variables are going to be strong predictors of what you're going to like or not like. But taking all these many less relevant variables that are harder to measure and they have less of an impact, but if you can put them all together, yeah, Facebook's going to have a really good idea of what you like, what you don't like. And in these days, of course, Facebook uses many variables, hundreds of variables that they try to identify, and the mix intermittently changes. I'm going to update that as a typo. Mix intermittently changes. So every now and then, Facebook updates the algorithm to include different variables, to remove old ones, to change the weight of the various variables, that sort of thing. Okay, so it's a whole big complicated formula. Used to be simple, now it's big and complicated because they have more data to work with now. This will give them better results. All right, next thing, revenue streams. So the vast majority of Facebook revenue comes from ads, right? Everybody knows Facebook is free, so they're not making any money off of subscription fees. You know, they're not really selling anything. They're not a retail site. Yeah, the other things, where do they make the rest of their money from? Things like site-enabled transactions, that's something, and some data services. So they, one of the things they would do is they would, you know, sell batches of their data to outside people. But they got into actually kind of, I don't know if anybody remembers, they got into some trouble with that with the 2016 election. A lot of people were not happy about that, so they kind of backed off. You know, nowadays they might still sell batches of data, but in some sense they're anonymized. So anyway, they're protecting privacy, but the data also is not quite as useful as it used to be, and so they can't get as much money for it, kind of a thing. Other things, indirect sources, right? So those are the direct sources. That's where they actually get dollars in the door. The indirect sources basically multipliers. So anything that leads to more people being on the site longer, thus seeing more ads and generating more data, that's going to help Facebook make more money off of that stuff. So if they have more users, well, guess what? Every user is going to see roughly the same number of ads. They're spending more time on the site, right? Time you spend on site is going to be pretty much linearly correlated with the number of ads you see. And higher engagement. Well, engagement generally means how likely are you to interact with content, in particular clicking on ads. So if Facebook can target the ads well, if it can show you ads that it really thinks you're going to be interested in, it's going to do a better job. I mean, basic stuff. For example, suppose Facebook can recognize that you're from around Chicago, right? Which is kind of a given that they can because it's going to be in your profile. Suppose they recognize that. Well, they're going to show you more ads for Chicago businesses than for, you know, local non-Chicago businesses, right? It just makes sense. If they can identify some things you're interested in, they're going to show ads for that. So I had my drink of choice is Scotch. And for those of you that know, there's a nice one called Ardbeg, which is you know, a good combination of really good but not crazy expensive like some Scotch can be. Anyway, one day I was talking about it next to Alexa, right? We have an Amazon Dot Alexa, and so I mentioned Ardbeg, and boom, next day I started seeing all these ads for it in my Facebook feed, and it's like, damn, you spying on me. So yeah, if you talk about some products, you know, that was a thing. They may have backed off on that because of, again, privacy legislation, but for a little while anyway, it seemed to be a thing. All right. And you know what? I actually did. It was for an online booze delivery operation. And I did buy some bottles of that. So you know what? Their ads worked. Okay. Now, of course, talked about engagement. Better accuracy of what Facebook users like is, of course, going to bring in more money. That's why they chase these models to deliver better, more accurate results. So if users get a better user experience, if they see more content that they like and less content that they don't like, they're going to spend more time on Facebook, right? So you'll see more stuff you want to see. You'll see fewer posts from peripheral friends, right? Once again, time to wake up. Fewer posts from friends that, you know, you're not that interested in what they're doing. We all probably have friends on Facebook that are like, oh yeah, I'm friends with you, but you're kind of weird and you post some crazy shit and I don't really need to see it. Yeah. Anyway, you'll get more of that when you get older, I'm sure. Second thing, pay per impression advertising. Pay per impression is an ad model where Facebook doesn't get paid when users click on the ads. They get paid every time they show the ad. And there's certain categories of ads that this makes sense for. Imagine that Marvel's putting out a new superhero movie, right? Most of the time you see an ad for it, you're not going to click on it and buy tickets because you don't know what your schedule is, and maybe the movie's still like a few weeks or even a couple months off, right? But they just want to build some buzz about the movie, and you know they'll pay Facebook just to run these ads. It's sort of, the model is sort of like TV ads, right? If on TV they're running commercials for something, they know you're not going to, you know, click on your TV and buy something, you know, through the TV for it, but they still pay to show the ads. It's the same kind of idea. Anyway, if they're doing pay per impression, the more ads that get viewed, the more dollars Facebook makes. And with pay per click advertising, right, that's the model where Facebook gets paid every time somebody clicks on the ad. Of course, the more time people are using Facebook, on average, they're going to see more ads. If Facebook can do a better ad to user match, if they can show you ads you're more interested in, they're going to have a better click to view ratio, right? So instead of like 1 in every 1,000 viewers clicking on the ad, maybe they'll get like 3% of viewers clicking on the ads, like 30 out of 1,000, which is like the high end of normal good numbers for those things. Anyway, of course, in that case, more clicks on ads leads to more dollars. So that's their revenue source. That's how it works. That's why they want to keep people on longer. Now, basic problem for Facebook is to control the sequence and the mix of feed content, right? Number one, what gets shown first, but the mix, how it gets mixed up, what gets shown at all, okay? So things like friends posts, ads, different formats, text, images, models, all of those, mostly you want to see your friends posts, okay? Videos are one of those things where, yeah, they'll show you, but unless you have a history of like watching the videos take up a lot of data to send out, you know, a lot of bandwidth, so they kind of don't want to do that unless you're interested in them. Images, on the other hand, most people like it. Most people would rather, you know, watch a movie than read a book. Same kind of principle for Facebook. So, and they got to mix in some ads to make money, but not too many. So their immediate objectives, number one, provide customized, interesting content that you like. It's customized for your interests in history and interesting to you. That's the metric that they use. And what it's designed to do, maintain and encourage user involvement. If they keep showing you stuff that you have a history of being interested in, you know, there it is, then you'll get to it. If you're in some message thread on there where people are talking back and forth about something, Facebook obviously wants to prioritize showing you that, you know, to keep you engaged, to keep you interacting with the site. And of course, they want to show some ads, but they don't want to super overpack it with ads because they want to maximize sustainable ad revenue, right? If one day Facebook decided to show 90% ads in your feed, sure, maybe that first day they'd make more money, right? Just based on pay per impressions, but they'd lose users, right? People would say, ugh, Facebook, it's 90% ads. It was bad before, it's terrible now, can't stand it, going somewhere else. So sustainable ad revenue. I mean, and you could track this in your own feed, but like typically it's something like 10, 20%. You know, there'll be like 5 or 10 regular posts, then maybe an ad. You can always like scroll through and kind of, you know, do an empirical study on that yourself if you want. Okay. Now, how does Facebook match the feed to user preferences, right? We talked about, in principle, Facebook wants to track what people like, but it's an interesting problem. It's a little bit deeper than you might think. So remember Netflix, you guys have heard of Netflix. What did Netflix replace? Yeah, Blockbuster. Yeah, up until lately, there was still one Blockbuster left in Alaska. I think it shut down. during the COVID time. Anyway, end of an era. Okay, so there were actually a few other online, movies. Netflix, it started out before it did streaming, right? It was kind of like mail order blockbuster, right? You'd pick which movie you wanted to see. You'd tell them, they'd send you the DVD. After you were done, you'd put it back in the mail and send it, and then you'd be ready to get another one, right? We still have a DVD of Step Brothers in our house somewhere because that was like the last movie we rented before we switched to streaming. Step Brothers, I think 2008. Maybe some of you have seen it. Anyway, it's kind of funny. In parts, it's very funny. Anyway, so we have that. So they have this issue. One of the interesting things about the Netflix model was that it worked basically by looking at what people actually wanted to see, right? Rather than what they said they wanted to see. So some services would ask viewers, hey, what kind of content do you want to see, right? This was like a thing for early newspapers too, online newspapers. The idea was you could click a bunch of check boxes for content you wanted to see, and then they'd customize a batch of news articles to show you first thing in the morning. That was like a 90s thing, virtual newspaper. Anyway, though, problem with asking people what they want to see, a lot of people aren't going to claim their real preferences. They're just going to put out something there that's sort of an idealized version of themselves, right? So suppose you're the kind of person, excuse me, who likes to watch, a lot of movies with cars blowing up and, other forms of violence. And of course, a lot of gratuitous nudity, stuff like that, like a lot of people like, not going to judge. But then you go to, you go to one of these online services and they're like, hey, what do you want to see? And you're like, oh, I like Oscar-winning dramas showing complex human interactions because, nobody really wants to claim they have like, low-grade taste, whatever. Anyway, so that's a thing. But getting around that, don't even ask people what they want. Just set up a system that tracks what people actually watch. So instead of Netflix asking you, hey, what kind of movies would you like to see? Netflix tracks what movies do you see and compares that to other people who have watched those same kind of movies and basically, hey, other people who watch this movie watch this other one and they liked it, maybe you'll like it too, right? That's the same kind of model. So Facebook tries to develop some kind of profile of the content you like in line with what other people similar to you have liked. So basic rule, provide content that's like past interactions, right? So again, back to this early EdgeRank model, users whose posts you've already known to be commenting on, you're probably going to comment them on the future, right? If you watch videos, you'll get more videos. If you take a moment to look at images, right, you'll see more images, especially if you click on them to blow them up in your feed. And there are also some stuff there about profile dimensions, right? So Facebook might look and say, oh, you're from Chicago, or you're from a particular suburb around Chicago, and we know some, average big picture things about that. Or they can look at your age and they'll show you different stuff about that. For example, there's a certain age bracket much younger than I ever was that might have liked Justin Bieber back in the day, right? But I don't think Facebook would be showing somebody my age, here, buy tickets to go see Mr. Bieber. Not really unless I had kids, I might have to take, my tween daughter to go see him, but she's not quite there yet. A few years off. Who knows who it'll be when she's that age. Anyway, other stuff, freshness and aggregation, right? So we know, again, from EdgeRank, more recent data should always be emphasized. It's going to be a better reflection of current interests and interactions, right? Who you are now is going to be a lot more like who you were yesterday than who you were 5 years ago. But you don't want to cut it to too short of an interval because that'll bring in big sampling errors, right? So, for example, suppose Facebook decides to base every day's profile on what you did the previous day. But guess what happens? You let your little brother look at your phone one day and he clicks on a bunch of random stuff that 6-year-old boys are interested in. And suddenly your profile is totally off, right? And all you see the next day is I don't know, Dragon Ball Z and Peppa Pig and stuff. And you're like, what the hell just happened, right? So again, that's that kind of sample error. If you anonymously click on something, not anonymously, anomalously click on something like it's an oddball one-off incident, that could be something too that, it gets filtered out if you have a longer window, right? It's like, okay, yeah, you did watch one Peppa Pig video that day, but you know, over the course of a year, that doesn't really rank as one of your top interests. Not going to affect your profile that much. Other things, because of the amount of data being generated and because of how much work it is to do that and all the other stuff Facebook has to manage, you can expect they're really going to update the feed sequence for every new interaction, right? There might be some things like Google Incident where, you know, you start typing in search terms and the next search results you get are closer to those search terms, right? If it's all in one session, yeah, they might do that, but they're not going to totally update your profile. It's just going to be kind of a short-term thing. What they try to do is they try to build some kind of long-term user history, and they know that your history, you know, your personal profile is not going to change that much one day to the next, right? You're not going to wake up one morning and be a hard left socialist and wake up the next morning and be like a far right, I don't know, Proud Boys guy or something like that, right? You're not going to shift your whole life on in that short of an interval. So anyway, they can, it's okay for them to take a little time getting this stuff up to date because people's profiles don't change that quickly. And of course, they want to maintain this aggregate history for ad content. The big thing for Facebook, the big reason why they do this, remember, they want to deliver you a good feed, but they also want to target ads specifically towards you, right? So a good feed will keep you on Facebook longer, looking at more ads. They use that same profile data to pick which ads to show you. So they're kind of multiplying the effect, keeping you on longer and giving you better ads. All right. All right, and if you want to, you know, little thing there about politics, so I bring that in. Again, that's from 2016 though. Okay, now, talked about some of this stuff, but that's the big picture principles. And the big picture principles don't solve all the implementation details. So, for example, there's things like, suppose I have users that aren't very often, or a new user who basically doesn't have a profile. How does Facebook deal with that, right? What do you show someone who doesn't have a profile? How should posts time out or be refreshed, right? So a question, even though you would say, yeah, there should be a time decay, how fast should the time decay be? And should it be different for different kinds of posts? Other things, how should you implement special promotions? There was a thing, Facebook Live, that they launched some years ago. You know, how do they put that into the mix? Do they let advertisers pay for better visibility of their ads? You know, hint, yes, of course they do. They're happy to take the advertisers' money, but how do they arrange to take extra money and how much should it be, right? And you get the idea. There's a lot of stuff like that, implementation details, that even with this framework of, you know, this EdgeRank model or, you know, enhanced EdgeRank model, there's still a lot of questions that, you know, Facebook can figure out how they're going to do things. All right. Now, again, the most direct method for matching feed content to preferences is user-provided specifications, right? Basically, a list of checkboxes, and you say, hey, here are some things that I'd like to see. Problem is, it's one of those things, it sounds great, but when you start thinking about how to actually implement it, how it's going to work, not so much. So, for example, I'm very peripherally interested in baseball. I wouldn't say I'm a baseball fan. I certainly wouldn't say I'm a Cubs fan. I wish the Cubs well, okay? And if they make it to the playoffs, yeah, I'll watch some of the playoffs games. And if they make it to the World Series, I'll probably watch all the World Series games, right? Like I said, I wish them well, but, you know, at the end of the day, I don't really care that much about baseball. It's just a bunch of guys chasing a ball, right? But having said that, I had a cousin, a second cousin, first cousin once removed, I forget how all that works. Anyway, I had a son of one of my first cousins. His name was Brock Lundquist, who was in the farm system for the Toronto Blue Jays. He was in like AA or maybe AA plus. I don't know how their whole system goes. He was in that for several years. And, you know, I was always like, hey, that's great. You know, maybe you'll make it to the majors one day. And if you do, I'd love to watch you in some games, right? Because he's family. Why wouldn't you want to watch? So even though I have not much interest in baseball and pretty much zero interest in the Toronto Blue Jays, yeah, I have interest in this particular person who might play for them. And that's really a tough thing to implement through checkboxes, right? You might have a checkbox for baseball. You might have a checkbox for individual teams. But are you really going to have like a whole list of thousands of checkboxes for all the players, many of whom are in the minor leagues? Yeah, probably not, right? it gets hard to work. So these kind of systems, they have a really tough time delivering content that's exactly what people want, right? It's not easy for Facebook, but the way Facebook does it, by tracking the sort of things people do, is going to have a better shot of learning details like that specific for me. Anyway, so that covers the first two, limited or unclear options, or interest in a small fraction of a bigger topic. But the last one is imprecise post tagging. So the other thing is Facebook has to figure out some way to label each post as to the type of content it has. And if you want to have it be really precise, you have to put a whole bunch of tags on there, right? You have to, dozens and dozens of tags, maybe more. And some of them are going to be wrong. Some of them are going to be like only partially correct. Like, 10% of this article is about what's in this tag, but it's still there. Do you tag it or do you not tag it? So, and you might even get the tagging process wrong. So yeah, all those things are bigger problems. And what Facebook, Facebook is making well over $100 billion a year in revenue. The default assumption should be they more or less know what they're doing as far as tracking what users are interested in. So, okay. So that's all the stuff about how Facebook shows you what they show you. Questions about that? Any other points for more discussion? Nothing? We're all good? Yeah. Ooh, it varies. So it varies a lot, primarily by product type. So let me give you an example. That is a good question. So for what it's worth, over the last couple of years, I was doing some work writing up case studies for McGraw-Hill for one of their, IT topic textbooks, and I dug into some of this stuff deeper than I would have otherwise. Now, you can imagine that there are certain product types that are going to cost a lot more per click. So the big ones, believe it or not, life insurance is a huge one, right? Insurance generally is big, but life insurance in particular pays a lot per click. And the reason why life insurance costs a lot per click, lots of dollars per click, because life insurance is one of those things that you don't really think about buying until you're ready to buy it, right? You'll be drifting through life, and then one day you'll be like married and have a few kids and a job, and you'll be like, oh shit, if I die, this whole thing is going to be a train wreck. So yeah, I better get some life insurance. And you get pretty fast within that window, right? Pick somebody and say, yep, I got to do it. I'm going to go do it. And then what happens? You probably stay with the same policy for decades. And there aren't that many major life insurance providers, right? There's, so the thing is, number one, you're very likely to buy from someone. Number two, there aren't that many providers or that many reputable providers, and it's a solid long-term revenue stream for the insurer, right? So it makes sense that that kind of product would be willing to pay a whole lot per click, right? And sometimes the numbers have been upwards of $100 per click they've been willing to pay, because they've crunched the numbers and figured out that, yeah, the people that are looking for life insurance, this is what our competitors are willing to pay for them. If we want to get those people, we got to kind of match up with that. All right, so that's a big one. Other stuff, other one, anybody heard of Church's Fried Chicken? Church's Chicken? Anybody heard of it? Yeah? I'm not going to ask if you've eaten it or what your perception is, but I did a case study on, this was one of the ones I did a case study for. So Church's Fried Chicken is like the distant third competitor to Popeyes and KFC. Anyway, but they're around, they're nationwide, they exist, and they did ads through Facebook where what they were trying to do is target people who were in some area where they didn't know where a nearby Church's Chicken was. And so they had some ad that would pop up and say, would you like directions to a Church's Chicken near you? The brilliance of this, if somebody was already a regular customer and knew where Church's was, they wouldn't need the directions, right? If somebody wasn't interested in eating at Church's Chicken, they wouldn't need the directions. This is a really good targeting mechanism to say, deliver that ad to people who are interested at that time. You'd be like, hey, yeah, Church, I haven't had that in a few, whatevers. I'll go. Okay, click. Oh, it's over that way. I'll go. And they were paying about $1 a click for that. Okay, so again, that's the numbers for these are wildly varying. Most of the time, there's some kind of bidding model where the different advertisers have to bid against each other in order to get a better position where their ad actually gets seen. That's typically how the model works. Yeah.
there a difference in cost, like someone clicks on an ad, or if they click on it and they proceed to buy something?
There can be. There are different ad models for that. So there's one, pay per click is a basic one that they pay per click. There's another one called pay per conversion, which is typically associated where the advertiser only pays if there's a purchase. But since that puts more risk on the platform showing the ad, right? They got to show the ad. Even if it gets clicked, they don't pay. So they're going to charge, you know, proportionally more for that. Yeah, you know, the platform is still going to make its money. Yeah, but there's different ad models. We'll talk more about that. There's the third lecture in Google is advertising. We'll talk all about online ads there. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Nice little detour there. That was fun. Okay. So next up, presentation issues, right? So if Facebook is trying to show the feed in a way that people are going to stay on Facebook longer, obviously to some extent they also have to, you know, visually structure the feed to the device that the person is using, right? So there's two different big categories of devices, mobile and desktop, right? And those applications are typically going to be very, very different. Desktops, you know, I'm going to throw in laptops as being desktops for this purpose. They have a bigger screen, more real estate to show ads. It has a landscape orientation, right? It's wider than not so tall, as opposed to a mobile device that tends to be tall but not so wide. Vastly more local storage and computing power, so, you know, you can track more data about people. People aren't going to get grumpy. You know, you can rely more on data stored locally on the desktop machine. And if you're having some kind of mechanism where input is required, it's generally a lot easier to do user input, right? Especially if you're trying to do something, you know, a longer kind of input. So anyway, in general, same application structure is probably not going to give, you know, the same user experience on mobile and desktop. So like I said, Microsoft Word, great for desktops, not so much for smartphones, right? Microsoft Excel, great for desktops, not so much for mobile phones. There are some apps that, you know, actually work really well on mobile devices, right? Anything that involves a little bit of swiping, right? Like Tinder, stuff like that, right? Swipe left, swipe right. You could do it on a desktop, but yeah, you know, the phone thing, I guess. I haven't used it, but I know people my age who have, so that's kind of funny. Yeah, they say they're doing it as an experiment. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, all right. So related to that, auto sizing. All right. So different screens, you're going to be able to show different stuff. So if I go to Facebook, here's my phone. So if I go to Facebook on this machine, so yeah, screen for a second. Let's see what crazy shit people are posting there today. I have a woman I went to high school with who has cancer. She's going to live, probably. So we're not super worried about her. I mean, that's probably is the caveat for all of us. So it's not specific to her cancer. But yeah, you know, they're treating it successful, and she's got chemo. And the other day she was like driving on the highway, and because she had chemo, she started like throwing up while she was driving because the highway she couldn't pull over, and she did like a whole big post about that. So, you know, feel bad for her, but still kind of some crazy stuff. Okay, so I got people posting stuff, whatever. There's things. Anyway, okay. But you see over here on the left, there's stuff, right? There's tabs. Over here on the right, there's people I know, there's birthdays, there's some ads. If I go, say, to do today's chess problems, you know, I got some shit there. They're trying to lure me into playing some other ads, whatever, other games. I mean, you get the idea, right? This is how Facebook is. Everything I'm going to access is pretty much right there. Of course, you go to a phone, same thing, right? Facebook stuff. Here's Facebook, right? Then I get a little bit, I'm going to do it on the main thing. I get a little bit of feed with like some of the same stuff. Those of you in the front, you can see that the pictures are pretty much the same. But, you know, there's little tabs up here to get to places, right? So there's like a triple menu bar here. There's single buttons for messages, for some other stuff. All I see is the feed. I don't see that all that other peripheral stuff around it. I have to access it through things because there's only so much space. So that's one type of auto sizing, right? Facebook is going to show you what it can plausibly show you on a single device's screen. But the other thing, there's going to be, even if you're using a particular kind of device, like a desktop versus a mobile device, there's still lots of screen dimension issues there, right? You might have an older desktop that only runs 600 by 800 pixels. You might have some new one that's closer to 4,000 by 3,000 pixels. It can show a lot more different stuff in different ways. So one of the things they do is this kind of auto sizing for different components. So there's two methods for that, responsive and adaptive design. You don't really need to know the difference, but I'm going to pop up this link because it's kind of funny for a reason that you might not expect. Screen. All right. So this responsive container, right? In a responsive container, what should happen is that when you change the browser window size, the container automatically changes size for it. And that can be with anything. That container could be something where your feed posts are, the box where the ads are displayed, any amount of content, right, could work like that. The other one is adaptive. Adaptive basically snaps into size at a preset point, right? So it says this is an adaptive container. It's 300 pixels wide when the browser is any width over 500 pixels. If the browser is less than 500 pixels, it shrinks to 300 pixels. But the funny thing is, because everything's kind of gone to responsive these days, because it just looks better. It looks better than adaptive. You can still do adaptive, but most current websites don't. The adaptive one is also actually a responsive container, right? It says it's adaptive, but no, it's this whole article about this stuff, but they actually updated the site and they made them both responsive. Anyway, all right, so it's not as funny as for you as I think it is, but it's still kind of funny. All right, whatever. All right, so the point is, again, responsive and adaptive sizing, there are ways to deal with this problem that the device screens are not, you know, simply one size fits all. All right. Other issues for ads, because of their small screens, right, mobile devices can't show as many ads, right? You have a desktop, you put ads all around the edge, right? That's how that goes. If you go to Google, right, you run a search on Google, you can plaster the top of the search with ads, you can plaster the bottom of it, be search results in the middle. But mobile device, you don't have that much space. Yeah, you're going to put some ads in somewhere, but you can't show as many. So typical mobile ads, yeah, they're going to be a little bit, you're not going to see as many individually. They're going to interfere more with how you use the app. So if Facebook has desktop users, they're happy with that. They can throw in a lot more ads, make more pay per impression money. If it's a mobile device, yeah, they can't show as many ads. They're probably not going to make as much pay per impression money. And the ads are, in a sense, going to be more annoying, right? They're typically, in order to force you to interact with them, you might often have to, you know, you got to scroll past them in your feed, and it's a bit of a chore. Or you might actually, like when you're watching YouTube, you know, you got to click on them to get them out of the way. I mean, yeah, you got to do that on desktops too, but, you know, you get the idea. Now, follow up with that, clickbait. All right, so everybody has a vague idea of what clickbait is, I'm sure, right? But what's the distinction between clickbait and any other thing that they want you to click on to go to, right? If it's a news article, if it's a legit news article, like, I don't know, Joe Biden challenges Vladimir Putin to one-on-one combat, you know, something like that be kind of crazy. Because Biden's old, he's probably tougher than he looks, and Putin's like a judo black belt, but I hear he's close to dying. So I don't know, maybe it's a fair fight, whatever. But if there was something like that that happened, that would be a legit news article, right? It wouldn't just be clickbait. They show a link for it, say, hey, you know, breaking news. But what's the difference between regular news and clickbait? You know, regular content? Well, number one, clickbait is designed to have an especially enticing headline or link, right? It's kind of sensationalized, you know? So if it turns out that all Biden did was he like joked to some aide that said, wow, this whole Ukraine crisis would be simpler if, you know, I could just challenge Putin to a fight, right? And they all had a little laugh about that. But then some news agency runs with and says, you know, Biden actually does this. And then the clickbait link is like, Biden about to decide the fate of the world by single combat with, you know, yeah, that's not really what it is. So enticing link, often somewhat misleading, somewhat non-news, you know, and typically you're going to see stuff like having to split through a lot of screens to reach content, or, you know, each of those screens is packed with ads, or even if it's all in one screen, you know, one very, very long screen, you got to scroll down for a long way to read everything. And there's a lot of ads between segments, right? So typical clickbait stuff like, you know, 12 signs your girlfriend is about to leave you. You won't believe number 6, right? Things like that. And you got to scroll through the whole list, you know, one way or another and look at a billion ads to actually see it. Now, Yeah, it may be interesting. It may be, it may even be informative. But the difference between clickbait and, more or less legitimate content is that clickbait tends to be sensationalized, and it has like a lot more ads. So how does clickbait make money? Well, again, it's associated with making money the same as any other kind of online ads. So the clickbait pages, they'll have ads running on them. If you click on the ads, they'll make money. If they're running pay-per impression ads and you just see them, they'll make money. There may be places where you can buy products. For example, the article about, you're about to lose your girlfriend might be linked to a book, but you can save your relationship by buying my book for only $12.95. What a bargain, right? Cheaper than a month on Match.com. So, you might sell products through there. And the other thing is there can be whole networks of clickbait sites, right? They could try to get you somehow linked. Or if you don't want to buy my ebook, come check out my blog that has a lot of other helpful free articles. And, they say, well, if you join the blog, you'll see more ads there. Maybe you'll buy something that blog is willing to pay a little bit for that traffic. So that's what clickbait is. All right. Now, we get into a little bit of the technical stuff, right? So we'll talk about content management systems and cloud. That's probably about where we'll end it today. Do about 10 more slides, see how it goes. Okay. So first of all, what's a content management system? Well, content management application is part of it, has all the tools for adding and deleting and updating content, right? The system, basically the database part of the system that says, here's the content we're going to manage. Here's what we're going to hang on to. We let users interact with it, change what's there, okay? The other part is the content delivery application. And those are all the tools for permission-based content distribution. So Facebook has both of those. It's basically a world-scale platform for semi-public content management. Because you go to Facebook, obviously you can upload pictures, you can make posts, you can look at what other people have done, in a sense, running queries. There's a content delivery application. The feed, of course, delivers content to you, and it is permission-based. It's not just sending you everything. It's only sending you stuff that your friends have posted that they've agreed for you to see, or that Facebook has decided the ads are relevant enough to show to you. So in Facebook, of course, users, businesses, and Facebook itself can all inject content. The content delivery process is based on rules that can be influenced but not controlled by users. So, for example, my wife had a window where she was reading all these like horrible news articles. She would be like, it'd be, like abused kids or stuff like that. And we all know things like that happen in the world. She was actually getting kind of horrified at how much of it was showing up in her feed. And I was like, look, if you don't want to read that stuff, you got to stop clicking on it. Once you stop clicking on it, then Facebook isn't going to show you those kind of articles anymore. She's like, yeah, okay. So you can have a certain amount of impact, right? If you don't like what somebody is posting, just don't interact with it, and eventually it will more or less go away, right? Just stop interacting with that person. You won't see so many of their posts. And the other flip side of it is interact more with things that you do like. And that's how you let Facebook know, right? If there are things that you like, click like on them or comment on them, and you'll see more of that. Anyway, of course, Facebook already influences how some news articles have been distributed. This has kind of been a thing in the last couple of years. But again, this is from 2016, where Facebook was basically not quite censoring, but limiting the distribution of right-leaning political articles, right? And this isn't like crazy conspiracy. This is from the Washington Post, which probably, if anything, tips a little left, and they don't really want to report this. So yeah, Facebook, they've had their issues with this too. Anyway, okay. So technical elements, content management system. So even if you just are managing oh, did you have your hand up? Oh, okay. Saw a hand. All right. Even if you mostly have static data that's not really changing, just maintaining that big pile of data and keeping it up to date, making sure it's correct, and letting people edit it now and then, all that by itself is a big challenge, right? Because you got to keep it available for users. You got to plan for incoming growth, more users, more accumulation of data, all that. But the fact that Facebook's data is dynamic makes it a lot more complex to manage, right? Like we talked about with these the hybrid RAM and disk systems, there's a continuous flow of most recent data. So again, normally, if you were just maintaining a normal system, you just keep the popular stuff in RAM, less popular older stuff on disk. But Facebook has not only a continuous flow of new, most recent data, it's also doing a lot of real-time stuff. It's delivering real-time updates, right? This initially wasn't a thing on Facebook. It wasn't that, you know, you could send somebody a message and it would appear, but it wasn't immediately that, you know, somebody did something and you'd get an instant notification about that. Same thing for comments. If you're writing comments on somebody's post, they can see a friend is typing something, right? They have that now. And, you know, various types of edits. And of course, managing changes in access and friendship. People, it's not just a user has a set of friends, it's every post can potentially have its own custom privacy settings, right? You can devise your own personalized sets of friends for various purposes and only show posts to some of them. So yeah, Facebook, it's a big challenge. Okay, so let's consider one of these big challenges. So the worst case for Facebook's network is that content is very popular and also very bandwidth intensive. Now, I'll show you a little, well, okay, I'll leave it the way it is. This is fine. I don't want to bog people down in the technical details too much. Imagine if Facebook is having a lot of fairly simultaneous requests to download a large file, right? Some music person posts up a very, you know, a new song, a lot of people want to see it, right? Or suppose there's an awesome new movie trailer about some new movie coming up, and a lot of people want to watch that, okay? And they say, Facebook says, you know, it's going to be available at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Tune in and see it, you know, so that you're not left behind by all your friends. Well, there could be a massive, massive number of simultaneous access requests that could overload the system, right? Facebook is only able to process so many of those queries per unit time on the same hardware. So, especially, right, in older systems, if Facebook is running all this on one single data center with only a few disk copies of the data, right, then it really can't handle that many. If it has to pull the whole chunk from disk and then wait for the next request, and the next request is, oh, pull that video again, do it, right? Yeah, that's going to be a big problem. So obviously the two-part solution, number one, that popular content goes in RAM, so Facebook can deliver, you know, can respond to more requests about it much, much faster. And the other part is replication. So number one, copy the videos, break up the video into segments so you don't have to deliver the whole thing. This is basically what YouTube does. It has video segments. Copy them to servers all around the world. That way you can kind of manage the stream. Instead of having one user wait for the whole thing to be pulled from RAM, they can just pull one chunk, and when they're done with that, they can pull the next chunk, and the next user can come along and pull that first chunk. So it processes a lot faster. You know, a few things: caching it in RAM instead of on disk, replicating it, making multiple copies at a data center, and storing it at multiple places in multiple data centers around the world, and breaking up the file into segments so, you know, the individual retrieval operations get processed a lot faster. So like I said, older stuff here, under the hood, broadcasting live video to millions, basically how Facebook does that. You get a little insight into how they manage it. Little intro to the cloud, right? We'll have more to say about cloud in the Amazon module, but for now, quick intro to it. So of course, Facebook has way too much data to store on a single hard drive, store on a single computer, right? It has simultaneous connections for millions of users, massive read-write requirements. Reliability requires that there be lots of backups available. You're just not going to do it on one machine. So their solution is a type of cloud system, right? And what the core principle of cloud is that operational requirements get broken into pieces and allocated to different computers. So if you had one massive database storage system that was still big, but like a little less than a terabyte, you could keep it on one machine. It might work well or not so well, but you could keep it on one machine. Facebook, you know, their multi-exabyte storage system, they have to break all that, you know, that database, all that set of database tables, they got to break them into many different segments, store those segments on different pieces of storage hardware. Okay, so that's what I mean in terms of the operational requirements. The first requirement is just storing the data. Well, they can't do that on one machine. They have to break those big files into many pieces and store them on multiple machines. And the other part is all the details of how the cloud works gets hidden from the ordinary users. Part of it's for security, part of it's for ease of use. So I'm going to show you a picture first, and then we'll come back to it. So this is kind of an old picture, but it still gives the overall idea. And the way you can tell it's an old picture is, see that little box in the middle that has firewall on the left and load balancer on the right? These days, load balancers aren't separate pieces of equipment. They're built into some other piece of hardware. So the fact that load balancer is separate, that shows it's kind of an older thing. But the load balancer function is going to be in there somewhere. So on the left, you have 3 stick figures trying to do internet stuff. The first and third one, they have a little thing that says HTML. They're doing some web browsing. The second one is sending an envelope, presumably email. They're going through the internet, and they get to the firewall there at facebook.com, right? So all 3 of those users, they go to facebook.com. Now, the arrows going through, each of those individual users, they have stuff stored on different devices in the system, right? So each cloud instance is basically a set of server machines and associated database hardware that, but basically a set of servers that's going to deliver the content that people are asking for. And so their data is stored and accessed through different places in the server. Most of what you have happen is the servers run the applications, they connect in the back to database machines, but the servers, might temporarily store whatever you're working on in that moment so you can get to it faster. But all their stuff is stored on different machines, but they can still access it by going to facebook.com, right? That's the essence of cloud right there. So it's like plugging something into the outlet in the wall, you get power. You don't know what generator, somewhere out there in the grid. You don't know where your power is coming from, but you know it's getting there, right? Same kind of idea. Your stuff's stored somewhere at Facebook. You as a user don't need to know the specific server that you're accessing, the specific piece of database storage media that your stuff is stored on. You just go to Facebook and it's all there, okay? Makes it very nice, very easy to use. So what's in the cloud? A shared interface, right? All the users go to the same place to start using it. There's some kind of load balancing mechanism so that you ensure that one particular subset of servers doesn't get overloaded with traffic. And then backup systems, right? Cloud systems always have automated backup. You're letting somebody store your data for you. So in order to maintain your customers being happy, you have to keep backups of your data, because if you lose their data, they're going to be super pissed. Other features tend to be geographically distributed. They don't have to be, but they tend to be, right? For example, in the case of Facebook, data centers all around the world, right? Same thing for Google, data centers all around the world. And cloud systems have to operate with an elevated level of security. Yeah.
So when you access a website, it says that you can't access it because the servers are down. Is it like the entirety of the structure where the servers are is down, like all the servers are down, or just?
Well, if all the servers are down, then you would get that message. But it's also possible that at that moment, a particular server that it's trying to direct you to might be down. But if you're getting that message, either they're having some sort of capacity problems that yeah, there are other people doing some stuff on servers, but they can't access it, or whatever, at some point through the interface to the server you're trying to get to, you can't get to that. Chances are, if you're getting that message, it's a pretty significant crisis behind the scenes, right? Because yeah, nobody wants you to get that message. Yeah. And a lot of times, it could be, yeah, there's maintenance issues. Sometimes those things are transient, like it could be that something went wrong with the backup process, could be something went wrong with anything, and they just, they're basically rebooting all the servers. And so, yeah, they'll come back, but it could be a little while. Anyway, security. So security has to be elevated for cloud systems. Imagine if you were doing stuff just on your own machine at home in the days before the internet, right? It's 1992, you bought yourself a fancy little laptop, you're super excited about it because it's color instead of black and white like everybody else has, because it's 1992, and you buy some game and it comes on a little disc and you put that disc into your machine. You don't really have to worry about security, right? It's your machine. What security problem, right? The security you're worried about is that somebody steals your machine. And, as long as, yeah, it's probably not going to happen. So, but cloud, you have a whole bunch of users all accessing the same set of hardware in some sense, and there's a chance that the bad guys could access some part of the system that they're not supposed to, right? Very, very different set of security problems. So cloud systems have to operate with much elevated security compared to, you know, more isolated systems. Okay, next question. What is a server? Well, a server is just a kind of computer that delivers whatever information people have requested to it. So, you know, the idea, it serves up information. It serves you information from a database. Now, typically, the way it's implemented most systems these days, a server is some kind of intermediate device between a database system and the system user. So you go to Facebook, you connect to a server there. That server is connected to some back-end databases that actually hold the content you're trying to get. Now, in principle, though, any networked computer could function as a server. If anybody remembers Napster or has heard of it from about 20 years ago, that was a system where everybody could join to pirate music, and some devices would act as servers, some devices would act as clients, and for a particular music file, you could act as one or the other, right? So if you were uploading, I don't know what was popular in 2000, I don't know, you could be uploading one file with your machine at the same time as you're downloading 100 other files with your machine. So it could be a client and a server at the same time. All right, but in practice, right, server machines, they're special kinds of hardware designed for the server role, and they're sold and marketed as server machines, and they tend to be much more powerful than typical client machines. A typical server is a lot more powerful than a typical desktop machine, for example, and is better at handling large numbers of simultaneous users. Okay, so we did this cloud overview picture. That's super. What is on cloud servers? Well, typically you're going to see applications running in parallel. What does that mean? Well, one application on a server, but multiple copies of it all working for different clients using it. Okay, so typically the way you set up these kind of systems, you have one server or a set of servers for each particular application your organization is using. So Facebook would have one bank of servers for their instant messaging, another bank of servers for photo uploads, another bank of servers for delivering feed, things like that. And the reason is, number one, it's better for security because the devices are doing the same kind of thing, so it's easier to spot if somebody is doing something weird that doesn't match your baseline traffic, right? If everybody's using the same application, for example, if everybody's using, I don't know, sending instant messages, and instant messages have a particular format, anything that doesn't match that kind of format is going to stand out just that much more, right? Whereas if you're handling data for a whole lot of different applications, then there's going to be a little, you're not going to have as much of a sample size for it, for example. And there's a lot of other issues that are simpler: backup, recovery, quality of service management. Quality of service in particular, if everybody on a server is using the same kind of application, then you basically know that if you double the number of users, you're going to about double the system load, right? But if you're using a mix of applications, it's a lot harder to plan around that because some people could be using bandwidth intensive applications, other ones, you know, low intensity applications. Anytime new connections come in, basically the system is going to say, which server should we assign you to, right? Basically looking at how busy the system is and how much work you're going to impose on the system. So at some point, you know, if the servers that are doing one application start to get busy, they're going to bring on some new servers in that same role. So any sort of big cloud system is never 100% online, right? Because they always have some, you know, they have some reserve that they're ready to bring on, unless maybe it's Amazon Prime Day, and then, you know, or yeah, that's a well-known crisis moment. Okay. Last thing we're going to get into here, thin versus thick, and then I think this is a good break point because then we get into ACID properties next week. So there's two kinds of clients and applications: thin versus thick. So I'm gonna draw a matrix for this. I haven't drawn much today. Screen? No, good. Okay. And in case anybody hasn't noticed, MS Paint is your friend. Okay. So clients, applications. Okay. So the thin client versus a thick client. A thin client, relatively powerful, or no, relatively weak client machine. Okay. A thick client, relatively powerful client machine. All right, so relatively weak client machine, think like a cheap and somewhat obsolete smartphone, right? Or anything any old and crappy laptop. A relatively powerful client machine, big, high-end desktop, multi-core, lots of memory, whatever. Okay, but these are relative terms anyway, so it's all relative to 2022. A thin or thick application, on the other hand, a thin application mostly runs on the server, okay? It's not going to do that much work. So the reason, if you want to think about why they call it a thin application, you could draw a line of basically where the work happens. And in if one side is the client share of the work, if it's fairly thin like that, that's a thin application, right? If the client share is pretty big, then it's going to be a thick application. So a thick application, thick app mostly runs on the client machine. Now, where you can see that these are going to match up is if you have a thick client and a thick application, this is potentially a good match, right? Because why? Good match because thick app may require a thick client to perform well, right? That sounds kind of suspicious now that anyway, but if the application is kind of demanding, then you need a more powerful machine to run it, right? That like if it's some big number crunching application. On the other hand, this one, put this here, if your clients are thin, you don't want them to do most of the work, right? Because they're just not that capable. So if you have some fairly demanding number crunching application, like some massive regression analysis software or something, you don't want to run that on a crappy outdated smartphone. It's not going to make sense, okay? So these are the two cases. This is potentially a good match for a business. This is potentially a good match for a business. This one creates problems, right? If you have thin clients and thick apps, right, then you have pretty limited ability to use the app, right? The app can't be too demanding. And in this case, if you have thick clients and a thin app, the question is, why did you pay so much for hardware when the work isn't happening on it? Okay, so those are the two cases. So thin clients, thin apps, that's potentially a good match. Thick clients and thick apps, potentially a good match. You need that hardware maybe to run apps that you're doing. These other two cases, you have a mismatch, and that's why. Okay, all right, we'll come back on next week. Have a good weekend, and we'll talk about some of these supplementary topics like acid properties. We'll get to that. Okay.